Today, I get the lovely opportunity of talking with Dr. Dana McNeil. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist and the founder of the Relationship Place, a group practice in San Diego. And she specializes in teaching couples about the Gottman Method and even clinicians about how to use the Gottman Method to change their relationship. Dr. Dana's experience covers a broad spectrum of relationship issues, catering to diverse clients, including military families, LGBTQ plus partnerships, and polyamorous relationships. And she even hosts her own podcast called The D Spot, focused on modern relationships. Dana, so good to have you here.
That sounds like somebody I don't know. Yes, thank you for all of that lovely description of what I do. That explains why I'm so tired all the time, Kyle. Hi, nice to see you.
Good to see you too. What we get to talk about today is about guilt and shame. These are kind
Yeah.
of really difficult feelings that romantic partners and relationships struggle with. Can you
Yeah.
just give us kind of a 50,000 foot view of how those emotions can impact our relationships?
Absolutely. And we should probably talk about what they are because one of the reasons I started researching this topic is I kept hearing everyone say guilt and shame together. Like they were these word, like I think of them as like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Like they just go together. And I'm like, but there's a difference. There's something different between guilt and shame and even embarrassment, because I think that's kind of a kissing cousin of what we're talking about. And so the main difference is one of them is you feel an emotion about an action, and the other is that you feel about yourself. There's a self judgment that's happening, right? So if I'm embarrassed, it might be that society says, well, that's taboo. You shouldn't do that. And I'm like, my bad, right? I shouldn't
Mhm.
like jaywalk or whatever it is. And I might feel a little embarrassed because my friend saw me do it. Or guilt is, I did something to let you down, and society says I shouldn't have not called you and stood you up. Right. So I feel a little bit guilty about that's probably making you sad, Kyle. You probably think I don't like you.
Right.
Versus if I have shame, that means my character is flawed and I am not a worthy person. And there's something inherently wrong about me at the core. So those can impact each other, and guilt can become shame, but shame is really the high end of what it is that we're experiencing that we don't often share with other people, even our partner, and it's very experienced secretively, right? Because we're so mortified about how we view ourselves that we're scared that if we share it with somebody that we love, that's just admitting that we have all these flaws, and that's absolutely giving them permission to abandon us.
Right. Which is that's kind of that double-edged sword, right? Shame, and Brene Brown talks about that. Shame is this part where I feel I'm unworthy, something must be inherently wrong with me, but I can't show you that because if I show you that, you're just going to confirm it. So
Yeah.
then I'm going to have to deal with that in secret,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is so much different than the guilt, which is really behavior focused.
Yeah. Exactly.
So how do these emotions show up in relationships? Like how do they, like if a partner has guilt and they respond to ways they might have hurt their partner intentionally or unintentionally, how does that differ from even shame?
Yeah. So first of all, let's normalize that. The recent research that I found said a quarter of us feel guilt on a regular basis, like very deeply. And
Mhm.
the way that we feel guilt changes depending on which gender we identify with. So females typically in the research that I've done, and it's just a couple of years old, females feel a lot of guilt about letting somebody down, having a responsibility that they didn't fulfill.
Mhm.
And so that can show up as in my relationship, I don't feel like I'm being a good enough parent, or I'm not taking care of the family in the way that I would like to, or that I had modeled for me. Whereas males tend to experience guilt in their relationships that they screwed up in the relationship or they're not handling their relationship well. So, what that looks like when I have relationships is I might have a female that's very focused on, hey, we need to talk about how we're going to handle chores and how we're going to get the kids to soccer practice and how we're going to make sure that we give them a gluten-free sandwich and that we're going to put SPF 50 all over them. And if we don't do that, we're a horrible parent. So that bleeds over, because if I can't influence you to want to do that, then you're not helping me alleviate my guilt.
Mhm.
Whereas a male might be, I want to talk about my feelings a lot. I want to talk about how we haven't been going on dates is impacting me and I don't feel attractive and I don't feel like you love me. And the male partner internalizes that as, oh no, I'm screwing up. I'm a screw up. I'm letting our relationship down. I don't know how to do this. And so I might avoid you, right? Or I might shut you down, or I might minimize you, or I might gaslight you, right? If we get on the really high end of the spectrum, because I don't want to feel those feelings. And so if I validate them, it's saying that what you're telling me is true. And so we can have that show up in our couple sessions
Mhm.
almost on the regular basis.
And when it shows up like that, when it shows up in kind of withdrawal or minimizing, how do you handle that in those couple sessions? What do you do?
One of the things I like to do is, let's not stay focused on the criticism, or if you're a negative sentiment override,
Mhm.
some really harsh like contempt, right?
Mhm.
What is your need? What is it that you're asking your partner to consider doing? Why would it mean so much to you if they were willing to do it? Why is it in it for them to give you that gift that's helping alleviate your guilt?
Mhm.
How can we talk about our positive need versus the thing that they're not doing well? Because none of us typically respond to guilt when we're
Mhm.
guilted. We get
Mhm.
defensive, we shut down, we criticize. Can we shift it into maybe starting to realize that there's an unmet need in there that
Mhm.
you're looking for? And can you be vulnerable and ask your partner for the need? They may not be willing to do it, they may not know how to do it.
Yeah.
Okay, at least we're moving forward and doing something different, because what you've been doing, criticizing, attacking,
Mhm.
avoiding guilt, is not working.
Right. And this is one of the things, as you're talking about, maybe more of those partners that kind of poke or pursue, is they feel that guilt. Oh, I want this to do better. And the way they cope with that is kind of attacking their partner for not doing A, B, C, D. And
Yes.
that partner is like, wow, I must be this awful partner because I'm just hearing
Yep.
all the things I'm failing at. Well, I
Mhm.
want to minimize those things that I'm failing at, or I want to disprove that I'm a good partner. And all of a sudden, we have criticism, the defensiveness, and we're
Yep.
not actually getting to the core. And what you're saying is it's really important, if we are that partner who's kind of poking or being critical or even contemptuous, to look at, what is it that I'm trying to accomplish and what am I needing here to be different? And how can I articulate that in a way, owning what's going on for me,
Yeah.
so my partner has a recipe to be successful with me?
Yeah. Because you're feeling too scared to be vulnerable in that moment. You're worried that your partner's not going to hear you, or they're not going to validate you, or they're not going to tell you that it's okay that you feel that way. Right. And so, really, what we're asking you to get in touch with is, what is your core need that would help you to feel more loved in that moment? That's much easier for your partner to respond to. And when you approach it in that way, even if the answer is no, I cannot do that, there's probably some sort of compromise that will help you get a little bit closer to what you're looking for.
So someone who's struggling with that guilt or even the shame that might show up, how can they start to get more clear on what the need is for them?
A lot of times we just have to start really basic and start in our body. Where are we feeling it in our body, right? So, whether or not you believe in an inner child or an adult child, or that we're all sort of like, my inner little person is feeling something that I've felt for a long time. It isn't just starting in my partnership. It's starting that I didn't feel like my needs were important. I didn't feel like I could depend on people. I didn't feel like people were going to wonder how I was.
Mhm.
And so starting to feel where that is in your body is information. It's not something to turn the volume down on or ignore or minimize because it's not convenient.
Mhm.
It's going to just keep getting louder. So, really pausing and taking the pressure off your relationship and putting the pressure on yourself of, where am I feeling it? What am I feeling? What would help me feel better? What am I ignoring, or what needs to be spoken that I need to find some words for?
Right. And that's so powerful because it's going back to going, what is going on for me? How can I own that? And how can I show up differently with this to get closer to the change I want? And I could see one of the listeners here going, okay, sounds great. I'm going to try it. And then they try it and they get the same response they've been getting.
Yeah.
How do
But
they cope with that?
it's not about managing or altering your partner's behaviors. The reason that you got brave and got vulnerable and tuned into what you need is for you.
Mhm.
You need to hear yourself acknowledge your needs. Even if someone cannot do it, it does not take away the fact that you have this need. And so if your partner minimizes it, diminishes it, dismisses it, tells you you're not worthy of it, okay. And then that's where you need to have like a gentle boundary. And nevertheless, that is still my experience. And when one of us has a problem, we both have a problem. So, how are we going to manage this? Because I notice it still keeps kicking around. I keep trying to tell myself that I don't need this. I keep trying to tell myself this shouldn't be an issue. I keep trying to tell myself I'm making too big of a deal out of things. And yet, here it is again. So it keeps knocking on the window. Can we do something about this that doesn't feel like it's taking away too much from you? Can I at least have you validate? Not even say that you feel the same way, but validate that if this is how I feel, it could be a problem for me.
Mhm. What you're touching, and I want to kind of go into this, right? When the guilt or shame shows up, us being able to kind of explore what we need, explore what it means to us, maybe explore kind of what it's trying to do for us is really helpful. And it's so powerful to be able to own kind of what we need and start to, for ourselves, bring our best version of ourselves to the relationship to be clear and to kind of make that change. And there's something else you just said that I don't want to let go of is if something's bothering me, it's impacting the relationship.
Yeah. I don't have a Teflon shield around me. I don't like projectile vomit out and it just splashes on back to me.
Mhm.
It's permeating into our relationship. And then whoever else is part of our extended orbit, it's also impacting them. And we're modeling for our families what it is to look like having acknowledgement of emotions and having people respond to them without taking responsibility for them, but having empathy and compassion for the experience.
Right. And I think one of the things that you're really highlighting is if we're owning our experience and we're able to acknowledge that our partner, even if they have different perspectives, different needs, that those have to be important. We have to have that sense of commitment and trust. If one of us is hurting, the relationship is hurting, and we have to be able to make space to talk about that. Right. And that's a really big thing that you're talking about, especially with we think about the sound relationship house. Those are those load bearing walls where we have
Yeah.
to have the commitment, we have to have the trust, and we have to be able to talk about these things with conflict management skills that you're talking about today to be able to strengthen the relationship in that moment and over time.
Yeah. Yeah. What other hope do we have if we can't? Our foundation is our friendship, right? Friends talk about each other's feelings. They don't take responsibility for them. They have compassion.
Mhm.
That must be hard. How are you navigating that? Maybe after I completely understand what your experience is, I say, is there something that I can do to support you? But I don't rush to the part where I tell you what to do or override your emotions and your experience. Because then, if I'm giving you advice or I'm problem solving, I'm not taking your experience into consideration. And then you're just going to reject me,
Right.
right? Because I don't trust that you understand what it is that I'm looking for.
Right. And this is one of the things that's so crucial for the Gottman method is understanding must always precede advice. And that's kind of what you're preaching here is you have to validate and connect with what your partner is experiencing emotionally before you can problem solve. And a very common dynamic is a partner might complain and they get a solution in response to try to get something moving forward. But the person who's offering the solution doesn't have all the material to construct something that's going to be solid, that's going to be a good solution going forward. And so, one of the things that I want to focus on in our interview here is what happens if you're telling us don't take responsibility for your partner's feelings, but make space to connect with them. What if when my partner is really upset or they're hurting, I feel like I'm a bad partner, or I start to go to that shameful place that I must be a really bad partner because they're even feeling this in the first place?
Mm.
How do I navigate that? How do I work on that?
Well, I would, in that position, if I were that person, I need to get clear on what it is that they're unhappy about because that's where we cross over to my shame.
Mhm.
I will just project my shame onto that situation. I will perceive like, oh, you're unhappy. It must be because of all the things that I've been keeping secret. Now you've outed me. We're close to the point where you're going to reject me, and I'm not even present with you anymore. I have no idea what you're unhappy about. It could be the fact that you just keep leaving your socks on the floor in the bedroom, and that's an easy fix. But because I'm in this headspace of I'm hyper vigilant and I'm keeping it secret and I'm keeping it close to the vest and it's always there about ready to erupt, I don't have the ability to hold space for you. I'm not really in conversation with you. I'm in conversation with my fear.
Right. Can you just go over that one more time? Because this is one of the things I think so many people need help with is what are those telltale signs of unhealthy shame that is getting in the way of healthy communication where we get to see each other as we are?
I think frustration and anger that your partner's trying to bring something up,
Hmm.
feeling this need to hurry up and fix it and like so that we can dismiss it and let it go, or like, why are we talking about this again? Why are you, maybe I want to hide, I want to avoid, I don't want to seek out conversations that I perceive are not going to go well. Those are probably some signs that I have a lot of worries that this conversation isn't going to go okay, and that the disaster scenario waiting at the end of the conversation is where we identify that everything is my fault and it's because I'm not a good person and that's what's causing all of the problems in our relationship, which is typically not why your partner is bringing up a situation. They're bringing up a situation because they want to have probably something like a stress reducing conversation. And so what I see often happen from my clients is if I don't know how to fix your feelings, I'm going to avoid having stress reducing conversations because they create guilt, right? If my partner says, oh my gosh, Kyle, I really want to repaint this room and I don't know what color I want to paint it. And I immediately shut you off and be like, just go to the paint store, just like go pick something out. And I'm shut down and you feel like you're a failure because we didn't like hug each other and go get ice cream afterwards. It's because I wanted to tell you about the texture on the wall and the way that the light hits it during certain parts of the day. And like, is it going to show fingerprints? Do I need satin or do we need an oily, like, you completely shut me down because you were worried that you didn't have the solution. And if you didn't have the solution, you're not a good partner and it's going to lead to your guilt and shame. And you're off and running at the races. And I didn't feel connected with you. So instead of fixing our feelings, can you ask questions so that you can be involved in that person's experience and hold space for it versus looking at yourself like you're a failure because you couldn't fix something that was happening in your partner. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. And this is, I think, one of those things that can be really challenging is you're asking, particularly a partner that might be navigating shame of how can you hold that emotion that might come up and yet be curious about what your partner's actually talking about. Because just like you said, there might be that very quick reaction or projection of, oh, this isn't get fixed. That must mean this about who I am.
Yeah.
And just like you said, partner might be just talking about paint and wanting to connect, make a bid for connection about paint
Yeah.
and what it
Yeah.
means to them. And if we are in that place where we're kind of minimizing or okay, just solve it, um, we're putting that on our partner about kind of our shame or how we're feeling and trying to get to a place where we feel like a better partner if we get it resolved. The
Yeah.
problem is when we do that too quickly, just like you said, partner feels shut down and our sense of self-worth doesn't get talked about. It just gets reinforced when they shut down.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that's a really good piece of if I'm minimizing, if I'm shutting you down, if I'm going, here we go again, what is going on for me? It's making it hard for me to stay emotionally engaged, emotionally curious about my partner's experience and what they need in the relationship with me. And what do I need in the relationship for us to be able to be a team?
If I'm constantly minimizing and pushing down and suppressing my own feelings,
Mhm.
there isn't space for me to let my partner have big feelings either, because I would have to be able to have empathy, like connect with my own emotions,
Mhm.
share an emotion. And so this is where that guilt and shame becomes very problematic because I may inadvertently give my partner the impression that I don't want to talk about their feelings, right? So if I somehow are like, okay, well, don't think about it. Let's just go watch TV and talk about this another day.
Mhm.
I may have inadvertently said to my partner, your feelings aren't important for me. Or, God forbid, I have a big feeling and I share it with you, and I'm like, Kyle, I'm so excited about painting this room pink, right?
Mhm.
And you are like, you just stonewall me, or you're just quiet, or you don't say anything, or you don't mirror me back in some way.
Mhm.
You're doing that because you don't know what to do. But I would read that as you think I'm too big, I'm too much, that I have two emotions, that I shouldn't be excited about painting the room, right? And that is all sometimes stemming from I can't let out any kind of emotions because if I do, my shame is going to come tumbling out into this relationship. So I've got to keep everything under lock and key. And that even means having empathy and sharing a connection with my partner. And that creates all kinds of problems.
Yeah. Because if I engage you and I don't do it well, then that means I'm a bad partner. And it's a lot safer for me not to engage you than it is for me to take that risk and try to show up and have it be hard or uncomfortable or even a little foreign for me. That's kind of what you're saying, right?
Yeah. Like, how would it be for you to give yourself permission if you're in that space to say, I don't know what the right answer is. I don't know what you're looking for from me, but you're not going to go through it alone. I'm going to show up imperfectly,
Mhm.
and yet I'm showing up. So, can you give me some grace around that?
Yeah, I think this is so important, right? I mean, one of the dynamics we're also talking about here, even right here, is kind of this meta emotion mismatch, right? There's one partner who's really validating of their feelings. I want my feelings validated. I want them connected. Another partner's who dismissing. And we know from Gottman's research that that pattern leads to the partner who might be expressing emotions end up feeling dismissed, leading to injuries and injuries that never get resolved, which then end up eroding the trust and safety in the relationship. And what you're really talking about is that partner who is dismissing and might be wrestling with shame and own emotions that they don't have a lot of history having connection with because they grew up in a family culture where emotions were dismissed, or even society where emotions were dismissed. For them to start to do that a little differently and start to see the value in connecting even with their own feelings and being able to give themselves grace to do things differently so that the relationship can get better. Am I understanding that correctly?
100% perfect.
Anything else you want to kind of add to that?
No, I mean, I guess my fear is that if we stay in this kind of pattern long enough, it doesn't work itself out without some kind of intervention or some kind of willingness to do something different
Mhm.
and to experience some vulnerability and allow us to maybe make a mistake. And
Mhm.
so when we also have shame and guilt, we are very protective of not making any additional mistakes that could out us or be a slippery slope to somebody recognizing our deeper flaws.
Mhm.
So it really is sort of like that thread on a sweater that you've got to start somewhere so you can start unraveling that. And maybe acknowledging to your partner, I don't know how to deal with big emotions. And I'm worried that I'm giving you the impression that your emotions or this relationship isn't important to me. And I just feel a little lost.
Mhm. Which is such a powerful first step for one, you to own what's going on for you, and two, for your partner to get a different message than what they might have gotten previously. Because previously, like you said, if I shut down, you might interpret that as you being too much. I don't care about how you feel, right? There's a lot up for interpretation. But when we're able to talk about what we're feeling and what's going on for us, even if we don't know, it gives us
Yeah.
a partner a glimpse into what's going on and gives them clarity that they don't have in that other pattern of what's happening between the two partners.
Mhm. Yeah, and sometimes it requires hanging out with one of us couples therapists so we can do a Dan Weil and
Mhm.
kind of speak that for you. Like, hey, here's what my heart is trying to say. And can you check in with your partner and make sure that I got it right? Because that's the vibe I'm getting, but they can say it in a much more articulate way. But at least we've sort of opened the door to bridge that disconnect.
Right. And the Dan Weil, for those who don't know, is where the couples therapist talks and understands what one of the partners is wrestling with and talks for them in a way that really speaks for their experience and creates a, just like you said, opens the door for
Yeah.
connection and understanding.
Yeah. Because sometimes we're the Cyrano de Bergerac for a moment, and
Mhm.
then they get to step in.
Right. Which is what sometimes we need. And that's okay. It's okay that we need that help or that
Abs-
support. So let's kind of come back to this. What are some of the steps that couples can address to heal and connect over guilt and shame?
I think like maybe a good intermediate place after you sort of acknowledge that we're having a disconnect and we're doing some missed bids for connection and we just have been a little clunky, not because we're bad people, but because we've never had it modeled for us. What is it that we did have modeled for us? Like, can we have some compassion that if I grew up in a family where we didn't talk about our feelings and I don't know even how to start and how that has made me confused, even about my value in having feelings, can we hold some compassion or empathy and get curious about what our partner's experiences are like so that we don't feel like they're neglecting us, but we can feel like we're getting some understanding about where they're even at. What do they know is good or what do they think is not good? Like just getting really basic.
Mhm. Which is such a powerful stepping stone because I think a lot of us get into relationships and just start acting out what's familiar, and we don't slow down and talk about, hey, this is how conflict was growing up. This is how intimacy was modeled. This is how money was talked about or wasn't talked about. Right. And the Gottman book, Eight Dates, really kind of helps couples start to have more of those conversations. But that's what you're saying. Instead of us trying to solve the problem and keep doing the same pattern we're trying to do, slow down and really start to talk about what goes on for us, what we learned, how we learned to engage emotions, how we learn to have conflict in relationship, and start from that place because then we can draw on that compassion and empathy of maybe the differences. And then when we can see that difference as something we want to grow together on and change together, now we are in that partnership to actually make longer term changes that's better for the relationship as a whole, not just better for one partner.
Yeah. Because we both have experiences that have wounded us. We both have things that we're scared that we're screwing up doing, or if scared that if we try it and it doesn't go well,
Mhm.
how will we recover from that? Like maybe the next step is if we have a misstep based on these varying backgrounds, how will we repair it if it doesn't go well, right? What does it look like moving forward? Do we come back and talk about, okay, this part went really well. I love this part. Let's not do that part again. That was wonky,
Mhm.
right? What's our new temporary compromise moving forward? And how are we going to repair it when we have a misstep so neither of us feels like we're a bad person or a bad partner?
Yeah. And one of the things I'm just going to pull out as of what you're talking about right now, when you talk about the misstep, you're really talking about the behavior, right? You're not talking, oh, I'm a bad person because I did it. You're talking about the behavior. Oh, I did a misstep. Oh, we didn't do that well. It's about the behavior. And that makes it a lot more space for us to do this differently. And this is what's so powerful about the Gottman method too. There's all these conflict blueprints, right? We have the Gottman rap report, we have the aftermath of a regrettable incident, and there's all these blueprints on how we can have these conversations differently to, as we've talked about, understand each other first before we problem solve, even if problem solving is needed. Because sometimes just being understood and connected with was what we're after in the first place.
Yeah. Because underlying that shame is usually an impacted self esteem.
Mhm.
Right? And so one of the ways that I avoid injuring my partner's self-esteem is I can gently let them know, here's how the behavior that I saw happen, my perspective, my subjective reality, or here's how the words I heard or didn't hear, how they impacted me.
Mhm.
Right? Because that is removing some of that pressure on a person that already feels shame or feels they're unworthy or they're not enough or that they're going to be a complete screw up. You're really using the language of your experience of it, acknowledging that they may have had a completely different experience. But when these behaviors happen, this is how I feel. It really takes some of the pressure off of that person to be responsible for your feelings or to be responsible for your experience, right? That behavior impacted you in a certain way. What behavior would you like your partner to consider doing next time?
Mhm. And I think one of the things that I also want to point out that you're doing, which Gottman really talks about, is talking about kind of the impact of what we hear, not going, well, you said this and you did this, which then
Yes,
gets our partner to go, that's not what I said,
right.
because they might recall it or might have intended something differently. And all of a sudden, we're getting a fight about the facts of who said what, not actually how it impacted us, not how it bothered us, and not what we need to get back to a healthy, strong, stable relationship so we can move forward together, which is ultimately what we want.
We will always get in trouble when we tell our partner what their intentions were.
Hmm.
And it's always amusing, I guess, in a therapeutic way. I feel that you did that because
Right.
that's not a feeling,
Yeah.
that's an assumption. And
Mhm.
your partner, I have never seen one client ever that's like, "You're right. I'm a total jerk. I did that intentionally. You nailed it." Right? There is going to be, as you stated, defensiveness. You are the
Right.
most important relationship in my life when you're my partner. And what you think about me means everything.
It
And
does.
so if you do not hold me in a high regard, I cannot I cannot regulate myself. I'm going to get flooded. I'm going to get physiologically aroused. I have to correct your experience so that I can feel safe.
Right.
And
Right.
that is not going to happen if you can contain yourself to talk about your experience of a behavior that you saw or words that you heard.
Mhm. Right, and that's one of the tricks of if you focus on your experience, you not only help you get closer to what you need in the relationship, but you help your partner in being able to engage what it is you need in the relationship so things can change.
Perfect.
Yeah. Are there other tips you have for couples to prevent overwhelming guilt or shame from kind of causing these negative interactions?
I think, as you and I are familiar with the Gottman world, it's like really being aware of your flooding because when you have a lot of guilt and shame, you're like a snap away from getting flooded. And so, really understanding what are your internal physiological cues that you're starting to need to take a break.
Hmm.
And on that break, it isn't just to go like write a list of all the things you're going to zing your partner with when you come back, but really being intentional about holding them in a positive perspective, getting back to that equilibrium of like, I love this person. We had a misstep. There's something that we had an off day. Maybe I was hangry. Maybe I didn't get enough sleep last night. Or maybe there's a conversation that we need to have that I've been putting off that is now coming up because it's resurfacing and I'm feeling guilt and shame that I haven't addressed this, right? So really taking breaks when you feel yourself overwhelmed and figuring out while you're on that break, what is my positive need? What is that I'm looking for that would help this feel like a better experience so that when we come back and do a repair, we're repairing with an eye on moving forward and having a better experience.
That's so powerful. I'm going to pull that apart because there's so many really important things of what you just said. There is I need to recognize when I'm flooded and I need to take that break. And the
Yes.
reason is because if we are flooded and we try to engage, we know from research we can't see another person's perspective, we
Nope.
can't problem solve, and we won't be able to stay regulated to have an effective, constructive conversation. Right. So
Correct. Your
that's
brain
one.
is hijacked. You are nowhere. You have left the building. You are not available. Yes.
Right. And so that's one thing. The second thing is when you take a break, there might be that hijack that wants you to go, my partner did this, they're that bad person, they're this. And the first thing you said about taking that break is going, I love this person. Reminding ourselves that this is about the conflict, that
Yes.
the relationship needs to change and we need to better understand each other, and that it's a misunderstanding,
Yeah.
not this kind of self-righteous or defensiveness that's poking at our partner, but going, I do love this person. That's why I'm in this relationship in the first place. That's why I chose this person. I need to hold that love. And then I need to take care of what is it that I need to come back into that conversation, to stay engaged, to be present, and to be able to work through this with my partner so we can grow this relationship and make it better.
Yeah. It's the situation that's overwhelming. It's not my partner.
And I think for so many people, when we are in conflict, especially when we're flooded, it doesn't feel that way. It doesn't, our brains don't see it that way, right? We
Again,
go,
so
oh,
that's also then making your partner responsible for your feelings,
mm-hmm,
right? I'm upset not because my partner's a jerk. I'm upset because I'm upset.
right.
I would respond that way to anyone if my core ethics, my values, my beliefs are challenged. That's my old story coming up in the shape of my partner,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, really understanding the situation triggered a response that I would respond to no matter who was in the room. It's not my partner. If I feel like I'm out of control, I feel like I'm out of control. I feel like that with anybody who pushes those buttons on me. That is not about my partner. That's about me recognizing that I'm going to respond that way and that I have a choice. My choice is I can stay that way and blame it on my partner and head towards a divorce, or I can recognize, wow, there's an unmet need that I have in here. I'm hopeful that my partner is open to hearing about it, but I have to get articulate enough and calm enough to ask for a behavior or words that they can hear so that they don't get defensive, so that I have a good opportunity to get my needs met.
I love it. I mean, I think that is such a powerful recipe to for people and a challenge for people to focus on what is going on for me, how can I own that, and how can I bring this to the relationship so the relationship can grow.
And you're right. It is not easy. I'm saying this in my, my Zen place of telling everybody what to do. And that is the challenge. But relationships are constantly going to require that you grow. And I personally do not feel we grow when we're not in relationships because everything seems like easy street. I got this.
Mhm.
I'm good. And then, like, it's like stirring the pot and like all these bubbles keep coming up and all of the parts of the stew keep coming at you. And if you do this right, you can grow through your relationships and be a better version of yourself. But it does require commitment and looking at the part that you are responsible for. And if you have a part that you want from your partner, how do you sweeten the pot so that they hear it as something that they can give you so they can be your hero versus somebody that's causing you frustration and that constantly lets them know they're not doing a good job?
I love kind of that positive sentiment that you just talked about. How can I help my partner be my hero, not the villain,
Yeah.
right? Making space for what can I do differently so we can really have a strong relationship. I think that's a great note for us to end on. Anyone who wants to learn more about the work you do or Gottman Method or kind of even your podcast, where can they go to learn more about what you do?
Sure. Yeah. And lots of places. So we have a website for the practice. It's SD, short for San Diego, Relationship Place.
Mhm.
And then we also have Therapy Getaway because I do intensives for couples that come around from the United States. And then anywhere that you can get a podcast, it's the D Spot,
Mhm.
short for Dana. There's lots of places to find us. And I would love to connect with anybody listening to this because if you listen to Kyle, you're cool. So I want to know you. So thanks, Kyle.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. This was so insightful, and I look forward to us connecting in the future.